The Galactic Empire had ruled the stars for millennia, its power absolute, its dominance unquestioned. Countless species had risen and fallen under the weight of its military and technological supremacy. For centuries, the Empire had subjugated worlds, enforcing its will across the galaxy. To challenge the Empire was to invite annihilation, and no species had dared for generations. In the heart of the capital, the Emperor sat in his grand chamber, surrounded by his council. They were addressing minor uprisings from fringe systems, rebels who never stood a chance. The council was calm, complacent even, as they reviewed reports. When one scout mentioned humanity, the room filled with chuckles. The humans had only just ventured into deep space, and the Empire considered them insignificant. Another race of primitives, one counselor remarked dismissively, waving a hand as if swatting away an insect. A small human fleet had been spotted entering the Empire's outer territories. It barely registered as a threat. A handful of ships? No advanced technology? No threat whatsoever. They won't last long. Another counselor snorted, drawing nods of agreement. The scouts' reports were dismissed as trivial, and attention quickly shifted back to other, more pressing matters. The Emperor's advisors, confident in their fleets, saw no reason to waste resources on such a laughable opponent. But rumors began to spread. Out on the Empire's fringes, word had begun to trickle back from traders and travelers, rumors of humanity's strange rise to power. Other species whispered that the humans had a remarkable ability to adapt, to turn the impossible into the possible. Yet these whispers were ignored by those who held power in the Empire. After all, how could such a young race, one that had only recently left its home system, ever pose a real threat? As humanity's fleet quietly advanced toward Imperial territory, there were no grand proclamations, no threats issued. They simply moved forward, methodical and silent, almost unnoticed by the great Empire. While the humans may have seemed quiet and inconspicuous, their determination was anything but. They had prepared for this moment, for a chance to face the giants who ruled the galaxy, and they had no intention of turning back. Imperial commanders stationed at an outpost on the outer rim received their orders to intercept the human fleet. The orders were given with confidence, with the expectation that this encounter would be nothing more than routine. They were told to deal with the intruders swiftly, to return to base before the day was done. No one at the outpost saw this as a significant moment. There was no grand preparation for battle, no strategy meetings late into the night. The commanders, certain of an easy victory, sent their patrols to engage the human ships. As the patrols moved into position, the humans remained calm, their fleet advancing with a strange, quiet focus. Imperial captains, watching from their command posts, expected the usual outcome, an overwhelming show of force that would send the humans scrambling for safety. They prepared to send a message back to the capital, informing the Emperor of yet another effortless victory. But then, something unexpected happened. As the Imperial fleet moved into range and opened fire, the humans responded. Their ships, though smaller and less advanced, withstood the barrage. What should have been a massacre turned into a standoff. Imperial commanders watched in confusion as their mighty weapons seemed less effective than they had anticipated. The humans didn't retreat. They didn't panic. They fought back. In that moment, the Empire's confidence began to falter, if only slightly. The first shots from the Imperial patrols had been expected to tear through humanity's ships like paper, but instead, they met a defense none of the commanders had foreseen. Imperial officers stood in stunned silence as their monitors displayed the human fleet, weathering the assault with surprising resilience. Human ships, though lacking the sleek elegance and advanced shielding of Imperial vessels, did not falter. They moved with a precision and coordination that unnerved the seasoned officers watching the battle unfold. Imperial commanders quickly adjusted their strategies, assuming the humans had merely gotten lucky, perhaps possessing some basic defensive countermeasures. But as the second wave of attacks failed to cripple the human fleet, the mood in the command center shifted from overconfidence to unease. How could such a seemingly inferior species withstand the Empire's most powerful weapons? As the Imperial forces struggled to adjust, humanity's retaliation came swiftly, and without hesitation. Crude as their ships appeared, their weaponry packed a punch that no one had anticipated. Energy blasts from human ships hit with pinpoint accuracy, tearing through the Imperial lines. Imperial shields, calibrated to deflect attacks from more advanced races, proved surprisingly vulnerable to the raw, almost primitive force of humanity's weapons. What seemed to be an inferior fleet was, in reality, a devastating force of nature, armed with technology that played to humanity's strengths, brutal simplicity, and overwhelming firepower. At first, the Empire's officers couldn't believe what they were seeing. They had fought countless battles, decimated entire civilizations, and conquered worlds with far more sophisticated defenses than this. Yet here they were, watching in disbelief as human ships, barely half the size of an Imperial cruiser, punched through their defenses as if they had been engineered specifically to counter the Empire's proudest achievements. "Impossible!" an officer muttered under his breath as another Imperial ship exploded in a flash of fire. The humans weren't fighting with finesse or elegance. They were fighting with relentless brutality, a style that defied everything the Empire had grown accustomed to. And it was working. The human fleet didn't engage in the kind of tactical posturing that the Empire's enemies usually employed. They didn't attempt elaborate maneuvers or rely on AI-guided systems to make decisions. Instead, they moved with ruthless efficiency, adapting to every Imperial countermeasure in real time, almost as if their entire fleet was a living organism, constantly learning and evolving. It was a level of fluidity and unpredictability that Imperial AI systems couldn't keep up with. While the Empire's fleets had become reliant on automation and pre-calculated strategies, humanity embraced chaos. Their adaptability was terrifying. Every time an Imperial ship adjusted its defenses, the humans found a new weakness to exploit. Imperial systems, designed to predict and counter traditional combat tactics, were overwhelmed by the sheer audacity of humanity's approach. There was no pattern, no logic that the Empire's systems could process fast enough. What the Empire had seen as humanity's weakness, their reliance on living pilots and outdated technology, had become their greatest strength. The first Imperial ships began to fall, one by one, and the sense of unease in the command center deepened into something far more sinister: fear. The humans were not just holding their own, they were winning. Imperial officers barked orders, frantically trying to regain control of the situation, but nothing seemed to work. Human pilots, unafraid of death, made daring and often suicidal maneuvers, willing to sacrifice their own ships if it meant taking down an Imperial cruiser. The Empire had never seen anything like it. Every species they had ever conquered had fallen into predictable patterns of fear and retreat, eventually submitting to the overwhelming might of the Empire's fleets. But humanity didn't flinch. They charged forward, relentless, unyielding. It was as if defeat wasn't even a possibility in their minds. Their ferocity was alien, even to those who had spent lifetimes on the battlefield. What made it worse was that the humans weren't fighting for survival. They were fighting to win. The Empire had grown accustomed to enemies who fought with desperation, who saw the Empire's power and realized their own impending doom. But the humans had no such fear. They fought with a confidence that unsettled every officer watching. Within hours, the battlefield was littered with the wreckage of Imperial ships. Humanity's fleet, though bruised and battered, pressed on, undeterred by losses. They didn't hesitate, didn't question. Each human loss was met with even greater ferocity, and their ships pushed deeper into Imperial territory with a singular focus: victory. Reports of the battle reached the Empire's higher command. Shockwaves rippled through the corridors of power as the details came in, an entire Imperial fleet decimated by a species once dismissed as barely sentient. The Emperor's Council, so smug in their earlier discussions, was now faced with the unthinkable. Their mighty armadas had been humbled by a force they had failed to understand. One commander, his voice barely steady, transmitted a final message back to the capital before his ship was destroyed. "They aren't what we thought. They fight like nothing we've seen before. They fight like they've already won." Then silence. The realization set in. The Empire's first engagement with humanity had ended in utter defeat. And this was just the beginning. The shock of the initial defeat reverberated throughout the Empire. What had started as a trivial encounter with a supposedly primitive species had escalated into a disaster of unprecedented proportions. High Command scrambled to respond, dispatching reinforcements with orders to crush humanity before word of their advance spread further. Failure was unthinkable, but the fear that crept into their ranks was palpable. The new fleet sent to intercept humanity's forces was vast, one of the Empire's finest. Comprising advanced warships with the latest in Imperial technology, this armada had never known defeat. The officers were confident, albeit more cautious than before. They had been briefed on humanity's unexpected resilience, and this time, they were prepared to overwhelm them with sheer numbers and technological superiority. Yet, as the two fleets clashed, it quickly became apparent that humanity's initial victory was no fluke. Despite facing a larger, more advanced force, the humans fought with the same relentless determination as before. Every tactic the Empire employed, every strategic move, was met with an unpredictable counter. Where most species would falter under the weight of such an overwhelming assault, humanity adapted. They didn't merely survive, they thrived in the chaos of battle. The human fleet was smaller, but their willingness to embrace risk, to make sacrifices that no Imperial officer could comprehend, gave them the edge. Human pilots dove headfirst into impossible situations, executing maneuvers that defied reason, often at the cost of their own lives. They sacrificed ships without hesitation if it meant taking down a larger Imperial vessel. This fearlessness, this willingness to lay down their lives, shook the Empire to its core. The Imperial officers, so used to calculated, risk-averse warfare, could not fathom an enemy so utterly unafraid of death. As more Imperial ships fell, the realization dawned that humanity wasn't just fighting to defend themselves, they were fighting to win. There was a grim determination in their every move, as if retreat or surrender wasn't even a consideration. To them, this wasn't a desperate struggle for survival. This was a calculated assault, a war they had been preparing for, and they were executing it with brutal precision. Back in the Empire's capital, the Emperor grew increasingly uneasy. The reports coming in from the front lines were alarming. The Empire, which had ruled unchallenged for centuries, was now losing ground to a species it had once dismissed as insignificant. Advisors scrambled to reassure the Emperor, insisting that the humans could still be defeated with a more coordinated effort. But beneath the surface, the fear was unmistakable. They had never faced an enemy like this. What troubled the Emperor most wasn't the loss of ships or territory, but the way humanity fought. The Empire had always relied on its superior technology and overwhelming numbers to maintain control. They had never needed to outthink their enemies, only outgun them. But humanity was different. They weren't stronger or faster, and their technology was far from the most advanced. Yet they fought with a cunning and adaptability that outmatched even the Empire's most sophisticated systems. Imperial forces, used to following predictable strategies and relying on AI for battlefield calculations, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Humanity's tactics were chaotic, seemingly reckless, yet devastatingly effective. They exploited weaknesses the Empire didn't even realize it had. Every time the Imperial fleet adjusted its formations or strategies, the humans countered with something new, something the Empire's systems couldn't anticipate. Reports began filtering in from other parts of the galaxy. Species long oppressed by the Empire had started to take notice. Whispers of rebellion grew louder. If humanity could stand against the Empire, perhaps others could too. The ripple effect was undeniable. The Empire's iron grip on the galaxy was slipping, and the rise of humanity was the catalyst. The Emperor, once so sure of his power, now faced the possibility of a galaxy-wide revolt. The war dragged on, and the Empire continued to throw more resources at humanity, desperate to turn the tide. But the more they fought, the more it became clear that humanity wouldn't be so easily defeated. Every loss the humans suffered was met with even greater resolve. Their fleet, while smaller and less advanced, seemed to grow stronger with each battle, as if every encounter only sharpened their edge. They didn't just fight, they learned, adapted, and evolved with each engagement. What truly unnerved the Empire's officers was humanity's endurance. The Empire's typical strategy of attrition, wearing down their opponents over time, had no effect. Where other species would crumble after sustaining heavy losses, humanity only seemed to become more determined. Their ability to take damage, regroup, and strike back with renewed force was unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. As the human fleet pushed deeper into Imperial territory, panic began to set in among the Empire's ranks. Morale plummeted, and whispers of humanity's invincibility spread like wildfire. Imperial officers, once so arrogant and sure of their superiority, now spoke in hushed tones of humanity's terrifying resolve. The humans didn't just fight with weapons, they fought with an indomitable spirit that no amount of firepower could crush. In the capital, the Emperor's advisors urged him to negotiate, to find a way to stop the humans before it was too late. But the Emperor, prideful and stubborn, refused. He couldn't bring himself to accept that the mighty Galactic Empire, which had ruled unchallenged for centuries, could be brought to its knees by a species as young and inferior as humanity. Yet, the truth was undeniable. The humans had done what no other species had ever dared to do. They had struck fear into the heart of the Empire. And now, with their fleet approaching the core of Imperial power, the Empire faced a reckoning it had never imagined. Humanity's fleet approached the heart of the Galactic Empire, an unstoppable force now looming over the capital planet. The Imperial capital, once the symbol of unshakable dominance, was in disarray. Panic had gripped the Empire's core worlds, and the once confident rulers of the galaxy now faced the grim reality of their impending defeat. The Emperor, seated in his opulent throne room, watched in silent disbelief as the final reports from the front lines trickled in. Humanity was here, at their doorstep, and there was no stopping them. The Empire's last remaining defense forces were hastily mobilized, but it was a hollow gesture. Every officer, every soldier knew what was coming. The human fleet had already decimated some of the finest armadas the Empire had ever assembled, and now, they were positioned to deliver the killing blow. The capital's defense systems, once thought impregnable, now seemed woefully inadequate in the face of humanity's relentless assault. The Emperor's advisors, usually composed and confident, were now visibly shaken. They had been pleading with the Emperor to open negotiations, to surrender before humanity's fleet unleashed its full might. But the Emperor, even in the face of destruction, refused to bow. His pride, the same arrogance that had led the Empire to dismiss humanity in the first place, blinded him to the reality of the situation. For centuries, the Empire had ruled with absolute power. How could he, the Emperor, the ruler of the galaxy, kneel before a species that had once been considered little more than an afterthought? But the Emperor's resolve was beginning to crack. Reports of humanity's arrival at the capital were more than just warnings, they were a death knell. He could see the desperation in the eyes of his generals and advisors. They had no answers, no plan to fend off the inevitable. For the first time in his reign, the Emperor felt fear. The human fleet, meanwhile, prepared for the final strike. The time had come to decide the fate of the Empire. Humanity had shown no mercy in battle, and their relentless advance had crushed any opposition that stood in their way. But now, as they stood on the brink of total victory, a question loomed: would they obliterate the Empire entirely, or would they offer mercy? For humanity, this war had never been just about destruction. It had been about proving that they would not be subjugated, that they would not be underestimated. They had fought their way through the galaxy not just to survive, but to show the Empire, and the galaxy at large, what they were capable of. Now, they had a choice to make: deliver the final blow and wipe out the remnants of an empire that had oppressed the galaxy for centuries, or offer the possibility of a different future. Inside the capital, the Emperor, faced with the prospect of annihilation, made a decision that would have been unthinkable just days before. He would ask for mercy. It was a decision born of fear and desperation, but also a recognition that humanity had become more than just a rebellious force. They had become the dominant power in the galaxy, and the Emperor knew that his empire's survival, in any form, was now entirely in their hands. As humanity's ships descended over the capital, the Emperor's message was transmitted, a plea for surrender. His words, once filled with arrogance, now trembled with humility. The great Galactic Empire, which had ruled the stars for millennia, was now begging for its life. The Empire's once mighty rulers had been brought to their knees by a species they had mocked and dismissed as irrelevant. Humanity's response was swift, but not what the Empire had expected. They did not rain fire upon the capital, nor did they issue demands for destruction. Instead, humanity offered terms. The Empire would no longer rule over the galaxy with unchecked power. They would relinquish control of their oppressed territories, allow for the independence of the species they had subjugated, and accept humanity as the new, dominant force in the galaxy. For the Emperor, it was a bitter pill to swallow, but he knew he had no choice. The alternative was annihilation. With a heavy heart, he accepted humanity's terms, signing away the very power that had defined the Empire for centuries. The once mighty Galactic Empire had fallen, not through the fire of destruction, but through the sheer will and determination of a species they had never taken seriously. In the aftermath, the galaxy watched in awe. Humanity, the species that had risen from obscurity to challenge the greatest power in the galaxy, had not only won but had reshaped the very order of the stars. The species once oppressed by the Empire now looked to humanity as their liberators, and a new era began, one where humanity stood at the forefront, not as conquerors, but as rulers by their own terms. As the human fleet departed the capital, the message was clear. Humanity had proven itself beyond any doubt. They had faced the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known and emerged victorious. And now, the galaxy would never forget that when the humans arrived, they didn't just fight for survival. They fought to win, and they fought to change the very future of the universe. The Empire, now a shadow of its former self, would live on under humanity's watchful eye. The Emperor, no longer a figure of dominance, was left to reflect on the arrogance that had led to his downfall. Humanity had done what no other species had ever dared to do. They had broken the Galactic Empire, not through sheer force, but through the power of their unrelenting spirit and their refusal to be underestimated. The galaxy had been forever changed, and humanity's place in it was now firmly cemented. Where once they had been dismissed, now they were feared, respected, and recognized as the ultimate power. And as the dust settled over the capital, the galaxy knew one thing for certain: humanity had arrived, and they were here to stay.